Some daughters don't just stop calling, they vanish from home forever. You'd think a phone only weighs a few ounces. But when it's your daughter who no longer calls, that little piece of metal feels like a boulder on the table. I sit here most evenings, in this same faded kitchen, with the same chipped blue mug of tea, and that silent phone. It used to ring so often I'd shush it while I stirred the soup. Now, some nights, I catch myself checking if the line is even working. Tonight, I want to tell you a story. Not just mine, but the echo of so many mothers and so many daughters. A story about invisible cracks that turned into a canyon so wide that one day, there simply were no more calls. If you stay with me, I'll show you how love can slowly lose its language. We'll walk through little moments that felt harmless at the time, tiny cuts that no one bandaged, big words no one took back, and the heavy silence that moved in afterward. By the end, you'll understand why some daughters never call home again, and why, sometimes, they feel they cannot. Because these endings, they almost never happen in one big explosion. They happen as a slow, almost gentle kind of breaking. I had 3 children, you know. 2 sons and 1 daughter in the middle. Her name is Lily. When she was little, that girl clung to me like my own shadow. She'd sit on the counter while I cooked, her small heels knocking against the cabinet doors. "Tell me about when you were young, Mama," she'd say, over and over. I told her everything, how my own mother scrubbed clothes by hand in a metal basin, how we shared beds and secrets, how we never talked back to our parents if we wanted teeth in our mouths. To me, these were stories of strength, of survival. To her, I think, they were warnings she didn't yet know she was hearing. The first cracks never look like cracks. They look like busy. They sound like, "I'll call you back tomorrow, Mama, I promise." I remember the year she started college. The house felt enormous without her. At first, she called every night. She'd tell me what she ate, what her roommates said, how the professor wore shoes older than half the class. I'd listen and laugh and remind her, "Study hard, Lily. Don't waste this chance." We sacrificed a lot for that tuition. I said it with pride, but there was a little knife buried in there too, wasn't there? Weeks passed, then the calls slipped from every night to every few days. Then once a week. Then, "Sorry, Mama, I fell asleep," delivered the next day as a text instead of a voice. I didn't say much. I told myself, she's growing up, this is normal. But a small, sulky part of me whispered, when I was her age, I wrote letters home every Sunday, no excuses. So when she did call, I'd answer the way my mother used to answer me. Not with, "How's your heart?" but with, "Are your grades good? You aren't wasting time with boys, are you?" I thought I was being a good mother. I thought that was love, worry, questions, advice, corrections. No one taught me the language of asking, "Are you happy?" One Thanksgiving, she came home with purple circles under her eyes. She'd lost weight. Her hair, once thick and wild, was scraped back with no care. "Are you eating?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "I'm fine, Mom," she said, sitting at the table, reaching for a roll. "You look sick," I replied. "Who lives like this? You have to take care of yourself." She flinched, just a little. "I'm trying," she whispered. I heard the words, but not the ache. That night, after everyone went to bed, I found a pill bottle in her bag, antidepressants. The word might as well have been written in a foreign language. In my time, we didn't have pills for sadness. You went to work, you pushed through, you prayed. When she noticed I'd seen it, her face went pale. "You went through my things?" she asked. "I'm your mother," I snapped. "I have a right to know what's going on." And there it was, her first real wall. Her jaw set, her shoulders squared. "You don't get it, Mom," she said. "You never do." I slept badly that night, angry and afraid. I told myself, I'm just worried about her. I didn't ask why she hadn't felt safe enough to tell me she was drowning. That's the thing about unmet emotional needs. They don't always show up as slammed doors and shouting. Sometimes they show up as the way a daughter stops telling her mother the truth. Looking back, I see so many soft moments I hardened. Like the time she called crying because she'd failed an important exam. Instead of saying, "I'm so sorry, that must hurt," I said, "See? This is what happens when you don't study enough." She went quiet. "Yeah," she breathed. "Okay. I needed to hear your voice." I didn't understand that what she really meant was, I needed you to hold my heart, not judge my effort. Does a mother know, in the moment, which words will turn into scars? I don't think we do. We only find out when it's too late to unsay them. The expectations sat in our house like extra furniture. Unspoken, but always there. We come from a line of women who married young, stayed close, and called home every Sunday. In my mind, her path was clear. A sensible degree. A respectable job. A good husband. A house no more than an hour's drive away. But Lily had dreams bigger than our zip code. She loved painting and music and people who didn't look, think, or love like our family always had. She talked about traveling, about living in big cities where no one knew her last name. Art won't pay the bills, I told her. Choose something safe. You can't eat dreams. Every time I said it, she folded in a little more. The weight of my expectations pressed on her shoulders like a coat 2 sizes too small. I called it guidance. She called it something else, though she didn't yet have the courage to name it out loud. Tell me, what happens to a daughter who feels she must choose between her own life and her mother's approval? Can a phone call ever stay light and easy under that kind of weight? So the calls grew shorter. The visits grew more polite. Our conversations turned from warm to careful. She'd tell me about work but not about love. About weather but not about worries. I thought we were just busy. I see now, she was already slowly leaving. Not yet in miles, but in trust. And I, blind in my certainty, didn't even feel the ground giving way beneath us. There's always a moment, isn't there? A night, a sentence, a slammed receiver that draws a line you can't uncross. Sometimes you don't even recognize it while it's happening. For us, that night came the year she turned 27. She brought home a man for dinner. His name was Daniel, but everyone called him Dan. He had kind eyes, rough hands, and a laugh that filled the dining room. He wasn't what I had pictured for her. He was older by 10 years. Divorced. With a little daughter of his own. I had spent years telling Lily, don't make your life hard. Choose simple, safe things. And here she was, choosing a man with a past and a child and a mess of complications. We sat around the table, me, my husband, her brothers, and this unexpected future she'd brought to my door. I carved the roast, listening, watching. Every time he reached to refill her glass, every inside joke they shared, a tightness grew in my chest. After dinner, when the men went to watch the game and Lily helped me with dishes, I couldn't hold it in. So, I began, trying, and failing, to sound casual. This is serious? She smiled. Yeah, Mom. It is. Her eyes shone like someone who'd made peace with a storm. He's nice, I said. But he's older. And divorced. With a child. You really want to sign up for that? Her shoulders drooped. Sign up for what? She asked quietly. Cleaning up someone else's mistakes. I replied before I could stop myself. The plate in her hands slipped, clinking against the sink. She stared at me, soap suds dripping down her wrists. You think his daughter is a mistake, she whispered. I didn't say that, I lied, too proud to back down, too scared to admit I was afraid for her, not of her. You didn't have to, she said. I heard you loud and clear. That night, she and Dan left earlier than planned. I hugged them at the door, my embrace stiff, my smile painted on. I just want what's best for you, I told her. I wish you believed I know what that is, she replied. We didn't speak for 3 weeks after that visit. I called once, she let it go to voicemail. She texted, busy. I'll call soon. She didn't. During that time, the family group chat buzzed. I, in my hurt, made the worst mistake a mother can make. I turned my child's vulnerability into family gossip. I told my sister, my cousins, can you believe she's throwing her life away on this man? What I didn't know was that one of my nieces, always online, always connected, was still in close touch with Lily. Within days, my private venting became Lily's public humiliation. She called me then. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Did you tell Aunt Marie and everyone else that I'm throwing my life away? My stomach dropped. I was just worried, I said. I needed to talk to someone. So you talked to everyone but me? She asked. Her voice didn't rise. It fell. And the falling hurt more. I am not a story for you to pass around at Sunday lunch, she continued. If you have a problem with my choices, you say it to me. Not about me. I tried to defend myself. In this family, we talk. We share. That's how it's always been. She was silent for a long moment. Yeah, she said at last. You talk. But you don't listen. I could have apologized then. I could have said, you're right. I hurt you. I am so sorry. Instead, I clung to my pride like a sinking ship. You're being too sensitive, I replied. We're just worried. We love you. There it was again, the word love used as a shield against accountability. She hung up without saying goodbye. The next big blow came with her wedding. Or, I should say, the wedding I almost didn't attend. She called one evening and said, we're getting married. It'll be small, at the city courthouse. Just a few friends. No church. No long white dress. No big family reception. My heart raced. All the things I dreamed for you, and you're choosing a courthouse? I blurted out. My life is not your dream, Mom, she answered. I begged her to do it properly, to think about how it would look, what people would say. She laughed bitterly. I'm done shaping my life around what people might say. We fought. Oh, we fought. Old arguments slipped in beside the new ones. I brought up the antidepressants. She brought up the exam I'd scolded her for failing. I brought up her lack of visits. She brought up all the times I'd commented on her weight, her clothes, her friends. It was as if every unsaid sentence from the last decade tumbled out in one messy, impossible to untangle heap. At one point, I hissed, after everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? On the other end of the line, there was silence. Then she said, very softly, love shouldn't be something I have to repay, Mom. Love without listening eventually feels like control, not care. That sentence lodged in my chest like a pebble in a shoe. Annoying at first, then painful, then impossible to ignore once you've walked on it long enough. The last straw, though, the one that truly broke us, was smaller than a wedding or a man. It was a baby. A year after the wedding I didn't attend, I was too proud, too hurt, too stubborn. Someone sent me a photo through a cousin. Lily, in a hospital bed, smiling weakly, a tiny bundle on her chest. My granddaughter. No one had called me. No one had told me she was in labor. I found out the way you find out about a stranger's news, through someone's forwarded photo. I dialed so fast my hands shook. She answered on the third ring. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, because the last time we spoke, you told me I was ungrateful and ruining my life. I couldn't handle hearing that while I was bringing my child into the world. I would never say that, I protested. You did, she replied. You may not remember. But I do. We circled the same battlefield again, her hurt, my denial. Finally, my fear came out as a threat. If you keep shutting us out, don't expect us to be here when you finally need us, I snapped. There was a long, shaky breath on the other end. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking, "I have needed you for years. You just didn't notice." Then, very quietly, "If you can't be kind, don't call." And God help me, I said, "Fine. Have it your way." That was the last real conversation we had. After that, there were a couple of stilted texts. Then, nothing. The phone that had once rung so often with her name on the screen went still. The distance that had been emotional turned physical, geographical. She moved farther away, I only found out months later. Have you ever watched a bridge burn in slow motion, not with flames, but with silence? You stand on your side, convinced the other person should come to you. They stand on theirs, exhausted from all the times they tried. Sometimes, the tipping point isn't a fight. It's the quiet acceptance, on the daughter's side, that the cost of calling home has become too high. Years passed. Not many, but enough. Enough for wrinkles to deepen, enough for my husband's hair to go white, enough for Lily's child to start school somewhere I'd never been. In those years, I did a lot of talking about her, to friends, to neighbors, to anyone who would listen. She doesn't call, I'd say. Kids these days. No respect. But inside, when it was just me and the quiet, I asked myself harder questions. What kind of home had I really made for her? Had I created a place she yearned to return to, or a place she'd had to survive? I'd sit with my memories like old photographs, taking them out one by one, turning them over, seeing details I'd missed before. There we were, years ago, at the kitchen table, the night she told me she was staying in the city for a job I didn't approve of. "I got the offer," she'd said, excitement bright in her eyes. "It's risky," I'd replied. "No stability, no benefits. Why can't you just take a normal job like your cousin?" She'd argued, I'd scolded, my husband eventually had to step in. It had felt, at the time, like just another mother-daughter spat. But now, looking back, I saw it differently. She had brought me a piece of her dream, and I had slapped it out of her hands. We parents like to say, we did our best. And most of the time, it's true. We really did. I was raised in a house where, thank you, looked like obedience. Where affection came dressed as criticism because that was the only language my own mother knew. She never asked about my feelings, she asked if I'd ironed the shirts properly. So when I became a mother, I did what I'd seen. I monitored. I instructed. I worried out loud. I believed that if I prepared my children for every danger, I was loving them well. What I didn't understand was that Lily's generation wanted something more than safety. They wanted to be seen. Heard. Known as themselves, not as the carriers of our unfulfilled hopes. In my mind, my criticism was guidance. In her heart, it was rejection. Both of us were telling the truth about how it felt. I remember one afternoon, years before the final silence, when she called me from her car. "Mom," she said, "I'm thinking about not having children. I don't know if it's right for me." I laughed, shocked. "That's nonsense," I said. "You'll change your mind. You're just scared. Giving me grandchildren is the least you can do after everything." She went quiet. "Sometimes I think you had me more for you than for me," she murmured. At the time, I brushed it off as drama. Now, I hear it as a thesis statement for all her hurt. From her side, which I've tried to imagine as honestly as I can, the story sounds like this. She grew up loving her mother fiercely, wanting to make me proud. She tried, again and again, to share her real self, her sadness, her dreams, her differences. So many times, she was met not with curiosity, but correction. When she called in tears, she was told to toughen up. When she succeeded at something I didn't understand, I minimized it because I was afraid it would take her away from me. When she confided in me about her relationship, I used her tenderness as ammunition in arguments later. To her, I imagine, my phone calls became minefields. Would this be the conversation where I commented on her body again? On her choices? On how often she visited? Would I ask how she really was, Or would I count how many weeks it had been since her last visit? How many times can a daughter hang up feeling smaller before she stops dialing? At some point, Lily's silence stopped being an act of rebellion and became an act of self-preservation. That's a hard thing for a mother to admit. I've heard stories now, from other estranged daughters, from letters and articles I never would have read in my younger days. They describe the same patterns. How are you? Meaning, why haven't you done what I asked? I'm just being honest, used as a weapon. I sacrificed everything for you, thrown down like a judge's gavel. For so many daughters, calling home feels like stepping back into a version of themselves they worked hard to outgrow. The anxious girl. The people pleaser. The one who swallows her truth to keep the peace. Lily once said to me, long before the silence, I always feel like I'm disappointing you, Mom. I laughed it off. Don't be silly. I'm proud of you. But what had my actions really told her? Had I praised her when she chose herself, or only when she chose what I would have chosen? On my side of the divide, there were blind spots. I didn't see how often I interrupted her. How I defaulted to advice instead of empathy. How I took her calls as opportunities to fix her life, not to witness it. On her side, there was exhaustion. A tally of small dismissals and big betrayals. A growing belief that I loved the idea of her more than the reality. We both made mistakes. She said sharp things. She cut me off without fully explaining. She didn't always see the limits of my own upbringing, my own wounds. But she was the one with less power in this relationship. That's the thing people forget, a parent's words land heavier, even when the parent feels small and helpless. I thought we were on equal footing in our arguments. We weren't. Communication didn't break down all at once. It seeped away. A misheard sentence here. A defensive reply there. Apologies postponed until the right time, which never came. Have you ever meant to say, I'm scared for you, and instead it came out as, you're making bad choices? Have you ever wanted to ask, do you still need me, but said, you never call anymore? Those were my failures. I spoke from fear but dressed it in criticism. She heard the criticism but never got to see the fear underneath. By the time we reached that last phone call, we weren't really speaking to each other anymore. We were speaking to old versions, old ghosts, old hurts. Two people yelling across a canyon, each certain the other side had dug it. People think estrangement is loud. Drama. Screaming, slamming doors, suitcases on the lawn. Sometimes it is. But more often, it's quiet. It's the absence of a ringtone on a birthday. The first year after we stopped talking, I woke up every morning with a strange sense that I'd forgotten something important. Like when you leave the house and know you didn't lock one door. Except the door was my child. During holidays, I set an extra place at the table. At first, I told myself it was just habit. Later, I realized it was hope made visible in china and silver. On Sunday afternoons, I'd pick up the phone, scroll through the contacts until I reached her name, and just rest my finger there. Not pressing. Just hovering. As if touch alone could close the distance. Neighbors would drop hints. Saw some pictures online, looks like Lily's little one had a birthday. I'd swallow my hurt with my coffee. Oh yes? I'd say lightly. They grow so fast. Inside, I was screaming, I didn't know. I wasn't invited. I wasn't there when the candles were blown out, when the first steps wobbled across the room. For parents, the toll of estrangement is a kind of living grief. You mourn someone who is still alive, who may be laughing somewhere, building a life where your name is not spoken. At night, I'd lie in bed and imagine she'd been in a car accident. That was easier, sometimes, than accepting that she had chosen this distance. Because if she was hurt, I could rush to help. If she'd chosen it, I had to face what that said about me. But do you know what surprised me? As the years went by, I started to realize that the silence was not painless for her either. Through whispers and sideways updates, I learned that Lily struggled. She and Dan juggled jobs and childcare. She had health scares I only heard about months later. She changed careers once, twice, trying to find a place where she could breathe. A friend of a friend told me they'd seen her once in a park, pushing a stroller, staring off into the distance with a look of, what was it? Relief? Sadness? Both, maybe. I began to understand something I wish I had known years earlier. Estrangement is rarely chosen lightly. For many daughters, it comes after years of trying in ways their parents never even noticed. She was likely wrestling with guilt every holiday I sat by the phone. She probably picked up her own phone, scrolled to Mom, and put it down again, just like I did. Because the messages from the outside world are loud, aren't they? Honor your parents. Family is everything. A daughter who doesn't call is a disgrace. No one whispers the other truths. You're allowed to protect your peace. You can love someone and still need distance. You are not obligated to return to places that hurt you. For a daughter like Lily, family expectations were a heavy blanket that had become too suffocating to sleep under. Friends in her generation, online communities, therapists, these voices told her that it was okay to set boundaries, even with parents. Especially with parents, if the relationship was constantly eroding her sense of self. I imagine her sitting with Dan late at night, their child finally asleep. Her fingers tracing the rim of a mug. I miss my mom, she might have said. Then call her, he'd respond. And she, eyes filling with tears, might whisper, I can't go back to feeling that small. I do not tell myself she forgot me. I tell myself she remembered too much. In the absence of our old home, she built a new one. Not just a physical place, but a feeling. She made new rituals, friendsgiving dinners with people who accepted her without commentary, Sunday mornings at parks instead of church pews where she'd been judged. She found aunties for her child among neighbors and coworkers. Home, for her, became not the house where she grew up, but the spaces where she could breathe without bracing. Where no one weighed her worth on obedience. On my side, I had to redefine home too. No longer was it the loud, chaotic holiday hub I'd always imagined, grandchildren underfoot, my children within arm's reach. It became a quieter place. My sons visited, of course. They called, they showed up, they fixed the leaky sink and took their father to doctor's appointments. But even those conversations carried Lily's ghost. Have you heard from your sister? I'd ask, too casually. They'd exchange glances and say, she's okay, in the vague way that meant, don't push, Mom. Society offered me scripts that only made it worse. They're ungrateful. It's that generation. Kids today don't know how to honor their parents. But in the quiet, my heart knew it wasn't that simple. I had demanded honor but not always offered humility. I had expected contact but not always created comfort. Does that mean I was a monster? No. It means I was human. Flawed. Untrained in the kind of emotional tenderness my daughter needed me to have. And so we lived, parallel lives. Her, rebuilding a sense of home without me. Me, sitting in the old one, haunted by the echo of a phone that no longer rang. People always ask me, when I share this story, do you think she'll ever call again? I don't know. That's the honest answer. Some daughters eventually reach back across the chasm. Some don't. What I do know is that, if that day ever comes, the bridge will have to be different. Not the same shaky thing we kept patching with guilt and obligation. But something sturdier, built from new materials, honesty, boundaries, respect. A couple of years into our silence, I wrote her a letter. Not the first draft, of course. The first draft was full of explanations, defenses, buts, and, if only you understood. I tore that one up. The second draft was shorter. It said, Dear Lily, I miss you. I'm starting to understand that while I thought I was loving you well, I often hurt you. I am sorry for talking more than listening, for criticizing when you needed comfort, for sharing your private life with others. You don't owe me contact, but if you ever want to talk, I will listen in a new way. Love. Mom. I didn't send it. Not that version. The third draft was even simpler. Dear Lily. I love you. I'm sorry. If you ever want to reach out, my door and my heart are open. No expectations, no demands. Love. Mom. That one, I mailed. Weeks passed. Then months. No reply came. I had to learn a hard lesson. An apology is not a fishing line meant to reel someone back on your preferred timeline. It's a way of placing your stone on the ground and saying, I won't throw this at you anymore. Maybe she read it. Maybe she threw it away. Maybe she put it in a drawer with other letters from me, unsent and unread. What mattered, for my own soul, was that I had finally spoken without trying to control the outcome. Parents like me, we're so used to thinking we can direct the story. But grown children are not characters we get to write. If, someday, Lily calls, I know what I must do. I must let her lead the conversation. I must listen more than I speak. I must resist the urge to explain away every hurt she names. Reconciliation, if it ever comes, will not be a grand moment with dramatic music. It will be small first steps. Maybe a text, Hi, Mom. How are you? Maybe a call that drops after a few minutes because we're both crying too hard. And I have to be ready for the possibility that her version of reconciliation might not look like the one in my daydreams. She might only want occasional updates, not weekly visits. She might say, we can talk, but these topics are off limits. My marriage, my body, my choices. Those are boundaries, not punishments. We older folks hear boundaries and think rejection. But I've come to see them differently. Boundaries are the fences that keep the wolves out, not the people in. If my daughter ever trusts me enough to show me her fences, I pray I will honor them. That I will sit on the porch she offers, even if she never hands me the front door key again. Because love, in the end, is not about possession. It's about presence. And sometimes, presence means accepting the distance the other person needs to feel safe. For some daughters, though, the call never comes. Not because they are cold or cruel or forgetful. But because the harm was too deep, the safety too shaky, the repair too late. If you are a daughter listening to this, carrying the weight of a phone you cannot bring yourself to pick up, I see you, even from this side of the generational divide. You are not heartless for protecting yourself. You are not broken for needing space. You are choosing, in your way, to stop a pattern that hurt you. If you are a parent listening, staring at your own silent phone, I see you too. You are not evil for having failed in ways you didn't fully understand. You are not beyond growth. But the first step is to look honestly at the home you provided, not just the roof and meals, but the emotional climate. Did your child feel safe telling you the truth? Did they know they could disappoint you without losing your love? If the answer is no, and your heart is breaking now, you have my hand in yours. Silence is the language of a heart that wasn't safe. Some stories will end in reunions. A phone call in the middle of the night. A knock on the door one rainy afternoon. You've gotten older, she might say. So have you, you'll reply, laughing through tears. Those moments are miracles, but small, private ones. They don't erase the years in between. They begin, instead, a careful rebuilding. Other stories will end differently. With acceptance that the bridge is gone. With a quiet birthday where you raise a glass to someone who may never be in your kitchen again, and you choose to send them love anyway, from afar. Healing, I've learned, doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes, healing means making peace with what cannot be fixed between two people, and instead choosing to become gentler in every other relationship you still have. I cannot go back and be a different mother to Lily. But I can be a softer grandmother to the children who are in my life. I can be a kinder neighbor, a more patient friend, a wiser listener. Maybe that is the quiet redemption for parents like me. We take the pain of our estranged children and let it teach us how to love better wherever we still have a chance. So, why do some daughters never call home again? Not usually because of one fight. Not because of a single act of teenage rebellion or modern selfishness, as some like to claim, but because of years of feeling unseen, unheard, unsafe in the very place that was supposed to shelter their tender selves. They stop calling when the cost of contact becomes higher than the cost of absence. When every phone call reopens wounds that have only just begun to scar. When the only way to love themselves is to step away from the people who taught them to shrink. It is a tragedy. But it is also, sometimes, an act of survival. If you are still at the stage where the cracks are small, listen closer. Ask your daughter what hurts, and believe her answers. Put down your pride long enough to pick up her heart. If it's already too late for that in your story, be gentle with yourself, and with her, in your thoughts. Pray for her peace, not her obedience. Wish her safety, not her return at any cost. As for me, I still sit in this old kitchen some evenings, the tea cooling beside me, the phone on the table. Sometimes, I imagine it lighting up with her name. Sometimes, I imagine it never will. Both possibilities hurt. But I am learning to live a life that is more than the sound of that one ringtone. To measure my worth not only by the children who come home, but by the kind of heart I carry, even for the one who does not. And if, one day, that phone does ring, and I hear her voice say, "Hi, Mom," I hope I will be ready to say the words I should have said all along. I'm here. I'm listening. Tell me who you are now. If this story has touched a place in your own memory, in your own family, I want to gently ask you to tap the like button. It helps more weary hearts find their way to these stories here on Dust of Old Days. And if you want to hear more grandmother-style tales, the quiet truths and hard lessons we don't always say out loud at the dinner table, you're welcome to subscribe to Dust of Old Days, and sit with me whenever you need a companion in the dark. Wherever you are tonight, whether you are the one who no longer calls, or the one staring at a silent phone, I hope you find, or build, a home where your heart can finally rest.